Chapter 4 Ghosts Don't Love You Back. Clara began packing on a Tuesday. She started with the sweaters, the ones she'd never needed because the house was always cold no matter the season. She folded them tightly, like binding up her own nerves. Then came the books, the toothbrush, the mug Willa had painted for her with glitter glaze and a crooked smiley face. She zipped the suitcase shut with finality. The decision wasn't impulsive. It had brewed quietly, like the late-night tea she never got to finish. Daniel's silence since their last midnight conversation had become unbearable. His walls had rebuilt themselves overnight, taller, thicker, colder. And Clara, for all her patience, was no longer willing to keep knocking. The house felt different again, not just quiet, hollow. She found Willa in the playroom, drawing with focused concentration. The girl looked up and grinned when she saw Clara. "I'm drawing you!" Clara's heart cracked down the middle. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she managed. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" Willa's expression shifted, already too perceptive for her age. "Are you leaving?" Clara paused. "Why do you think that? I saw your suitcase." Clara sat down beside her. "I wasn't going to say goodbye just yet. I didn't want to make you sad." Willa blinked slowly. "Are you mad at Daddy?" "No." A lie, and they both knew it. Willa's small hand reached for hers. "Please don't go. I'll be good. I promise, even when I'm grumpy." Clara choked back tears. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault." "Then why do grown-ups always leave?" The question slammed into Clara with cruel accuracy. She had no answer, only the familiar ache of every goodbye that had ever hollowed her out. "I'll stay," Clara whispered. "For now." She found Daniel in the study that evening. He didn't look up when she knocked, just muttered, "Come in," like she was a courier and not the person raising his daughter by day and standing in his kitchen by night. "Can we talk?" she asked. She walked in anyway. "I was going to leave," Clara said flatly. "Suitcases still upstairs, half packed." At that, his eyes finally lifted to hers. "You can't keep doing this," she said, voice shaking. "Pulling me in when you've had too much to drink and then acting like it didn't happen in the morning. I'm not your wife, Daniel. I'm not a ghost." Silence. "I don't want to be your emotional landfill," she continued. "I didn't come here to play replacement therapy for a man who can only speak when he's half gone." Still nothing. "Say something." Daniel's voice was low and dangerous. "What do you want me to say? That I've been a mess since the day she died? That I haven't touched another woman or said a real sentence that wasn't about quarterly earnings? That you are the first person who's even gotten through the static?" Clara's heart thudded hard. "Yes," she said. "I want you to say that, but sober, and not followed by you pretending I'm someone else." He stood then, suddenly, and she flinched at the motion, not in fear, but in bracing for a storm. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said, "and that's the worst part." Clara stared. "So you admit it, you've been using me." His jaw clenched. "I never meant to. But yes, maybe I did. Maybe I liked the silence with you, the way you make her laugh, the way you don't push. Maybe I wanted to forget, just for a moment, what it's like to miss someone until it eats you alive. And you think that excuses it?" "No," he said quietly, "but I'm not asking for forgiveness." They stared at each other across the chasm of words neither could take back. She finally said, "You don't get to grieve on my back." Daniel nodded once, slowly, understood. Then he turned and walked past her, out the study, out of the room, out of reach. The next few days passed like winter. No midnight encounters, no accidental moments, no lingering gazes. They spoke only when necessary. Clara remained professional, smiles for Willa, meals prepped, stories read at bedtime, but inside she was hollowed out. It felt like the house had shifted around her, reverting back to its original grieving state. The rooms echoed again. The laughter had vanished. Even Willa noticed. She started sleeping in Clara's bed more often without asking, started drawing pictures of her, her father, and a stick-figure woman floating in the sky with a sad face. The house had become a mausoleum again. Only this time, Clara was grieving too. Not for Lena, but for the possibility she'd started to believe in, for the man who showed up at midnight and accidentally let the real him slip through. She considered leaving again, but Willa's arms around her neck every night made her stay. She'd told herself she was staying for the child, for stability, but deep down, she knew she was also staying for something that hadn't happened yet. Something she didn't quite have the courage to name. Chapter 5. What's left after the storm? It happened on a rainy Thursday. Clara had just dropped Willa off at preschool when the call came. Her phone buzzed against the dashboard, the school's number blinking on the screen like a siren. Willa had broken down in class. Not tantrum, not mischief, just silent sobbing that turned into a breathless panic spiral. Her teacher said they couldn't calm her down, that she kept whispering, "Don't leave me too," over and over again. By the time Clara arrived, Willa had curled into herself like a shell. Her cheeks were blotched, her hands shaking. Clara held her close until the trembling passed. She didn't say anything, just rocked her slowly in a quiet room while the storm raged outside. Later in the car, Willa finally spoke. "Do you think my mommy still knows who I am?" Clara gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes," she said without pause. "She knows, and she would be so proud of you." Willa didn't reply. She just stared out the window, her eyes too old for 5. Daniel arrived home late that night. His tie was crooked. His face looked carved from stone. "She had a panic attack," Clara said before he could speak. "At school." He stopped in the entryway, his hands frozen at his sides. "I picked her up, brought her home. She's asleep now, but—" Clara's voice cracked. "You can't keep pretending she's okay just because she doesn't cry in front of you." He didn't argue. Instead, he walked past her into the dark hallway like a man chasing ghosts. Clara didn't follow. Not this time. The next day, he canceled all his meetings. The staff whispered about it in the kitchen, unsure whether to expect chaos or quiet. Clara was in the garden with Willa when he approached, slowly, hands in his coat pockets. He knelt down beside his daughter and brushed a leaf from her hair. "I made you something," Willa said, holding up a slightly crushed paper flower. Daniel took it gently. "It's beautiful." And then, with a kind of trembling hesitation, he said, "I'm going to see someone. A therapist." Clara turned to him, startled. "I should have done it a long time ago," he continued, not looking at her. "But I didn't want to admit I wasn't okay. I thought if I kept moving, it would fade." Willa looked between them, confused but calm. Daniel added softly, "It didn't." He kissed the top of Willa's head and walked back inside. Clara watched him go, her heart beating something slow and new. That night he came into the kitchen, sober. No whiskey in hand, no haze in his eyes. Just Daniel, in a hoodie and sweatpants, hair damp from a shower like any man coming down from the weight of the day. Clara was heating milk on the stove. She didn't look up. "I'm not staying long," he said, hovering at the edge of the room. "I just needed to say something." She stirred the milk gently. "Then say it." He exhaled. "I'm sorry." She turned. "I called you by her name," he said. "I did it more than once. I wish I could say I didn't realize, but I did. I knew. I just wanted comfort, familiarity. And I took it without asking." Clara said nothing. "I think I wanted you to be her," he continued, "for a moment, because if you were, then maybe none of this was real. Maybe she wasn't gone. Maybe I hadn't failed her." His voice cracked on the last word. "But you're not her," he said. "You never were. And that's the part I've been trying not to see." Clara's chest felt tight, her hands clenched on the handle of the pot. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said slowly, "I see you." He stepped closer, not too close, enough. "You're nothing like Lena. You make the room quieter, calmer. I can breathe when you're around, and that terrifies me because it feels like cheating." Her breath hitched. "But I'm trying," he whispered. "I want to be someone who doesn't hurt the people who show up." A silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. Then Clara poured the milk into 2 mugs, held one out to him. He accepted it like a fragile offering. They sat at the counter together, shoulder to shoulder, not touching. Not lovers. Not yet. But something was beginning. Something honest. He told her about therapy, about the way his grief had turned into armor and then into a cage. He told her about the guilt, the survivor's ache, the way he'd hated himself for smiling after Lena's death, even accidentally. Clara told him about her own lost things, a relationship she'd left, the child she almost had, the way silence sometimes felt safer than hope. They didn't kiss. They didn't even brush hands. But when they stood up to leave, Daniel reached for her mug. "I'll wash this," he said, a small gesture, insignificant on its own, but to Clara, it felt like the beginning of something real. Not perfect, but possible. Chapter 6, If You Want Me To. The trees outside had turned gold. Summer had faded into something softer. the kind of season that asked less of you, that allowed for breath. It had been 3 months since that late-night kitchen truce. 3 months since Daniel stood before Clara sober and said the words she hadn't known she needed. I see you. She had moved out of the guest wing, not into his room yet, but into a space of her own down the hall. A subtle change, symbolic more than anything. A gesture that she was no longer just the help, but still not quite a partner. Not officially. Not yet. But everything had changed. Daniel had begun therapy in earnest. Twice a week, he never missed a session. He still had bad days. Clara could tell by the way his jaw would tighten at breakfast or how he'd disappear into his office for hours. But the difference now was this. He came back. He showed up for Willa, for himself, for her. He started cooking once a week, disastrously at first. There was an infamous roasted chicken incident that nearly set the oven ablaze. Clara laughed so hard she cried. He didn't sulk, just ordered pizza and handed her a glass of wine like a peace offering. There was warmth now in places where the cold used to reign. Music played sometimes in the living room. The portrait of Lena still hung above the fireplace, but now it felt more like remembrance than a shrine. Clara no longer avoided looking at it. Willa had blossomed. Her therapist said the anxiety was easing. She still had nightmares sometimes, still clung tighter on cloudy mornings, but she laughed more, danced, asked questions. She stopped whispering, "Don't leave me too," in her sleep. One evening, Clara caught her drawing again, this time a picture of 3 stick figures. One tall man, one girl with curly hair, and a woman with a red heart over her chest. "That's you," Willa said proudly. "I gave you a heart so Daddy remembers to be nice." Clara couldn't stop smiling for an hour. It was a Sunday afternoon in early November when it happened. They were in the garden, Willa bouncing between flower beds, while Daniel and Clara sat on the low stone bench by the pond. The sun was warm for autumn, a rare mercy. Clara had a book in her lap, unread. Daniel was sipping tea. Willa came bounding over, twigs in her hair and dirt on her knees. She plopped herself dramatically between them and said, "Are you going to stay forever?" Clara blinked. "What?" "Here. With us. You're not the nanny anymore. You're just here." Daniel stilled beside her. Clara turned toward the child slowly. "Do you want me to stay forever?" Willa rolled her eyes in that exaggerated theatrical way only a 5-year-old could manage. "Duh." Clara smiled, her throat tightening. She glanced at Daniel, who was watching her, eyes soft, expression unreadable but open. "If you want me to," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an offering. He nodded. No hesitation this time. No ghosts between them. "Just now." "Yes," he said quietly. "I want you to." Willa whooped and threw her arms around Clara's neck. Clara laughed through the sudden sting of tears. Daniel reached out, brushing a leaf from Willa's hair, his hand lingering on Clara's shoulder. The breeze picked up. The garden shimmered gold. That night, as they put Willa to bed, Daniel touched Clara's hand in the hallway. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she whispered. "For not giving up on me." She held his gaze. "I almost did. I know." He leaned forward, brushed his lips to her temple. Not possessive, not rushed, just present. Honest. They didn't need declarations. Not yet. They were building something slow, solid, and finally, free of ghosts. Epilogue. A life that fits. 1 year later. The portrait was gone. Not destroyed, not hidden, just relocated, moved to Daniel's private study where it belonged. A memory kept, not a monument maintained. In its place above the fireplace was something new, a framed crayon drawing by Willa. 3 figures again, like the first one, but this time the woman had real hair, yarn glued down in dark waves, and a crown made of flowers. Clara didn't even know Willa had made it until Daniel quietly framed it himself. They weren't married, yet. There had been no grand proposal, no diamond under candlelight. Daniel had once tried, in that stiff, old-fashioned way of his, down on one knee with a velvet box and shaking hands. Clara had just smiled, kissed his forehead, and said, "Ask me again. When you're not afraid, I'll say no." He had laughed for a full minute, relief pouring out of him like rain after drought. They lived differently now. The house wasn't so quiet. Willa filled it with dancing and questions and the kind of wild, chaotic joy that only children seem to generate. Sadder, there were muddy footprints in the hallway, forgotten puzzles under armchairs, crayon marks on the kitchen table. Daniel still pretended not to notice. Clara started writing again, something she hadn't done in years. Nothing public yet, but poems tucked in drawers, stories jotted in the margins of cookbooks. Sometimes Willa illustrated them. Daniel, in turn, started gardening. Clara still teased him about his tragic tulip phase. But the herbs, he had a gift for those. Basil, mint, rosemary. They cooked together often now. The scars were still there. Daniel's grief, Clara's guardedness, but they no longer dictated the air in the room. They were simply part of the architecture now, a soft echo in the walls, not a scream. It was a Sunday again, somehow always Sundays when life felt most real. They were in the kitchen. Willa at the counter, flour all over her cheeks, helping roll out cinnamon buns with complete chaos. Daniel stood behind Clara, arms around her waist, chin on her shoulder. She was wearing one of his old sweaters, still too big, still comforting. I burned the pecans, Willa announced. Daniel kissed Clara's cheek. Let her burn them. We'll pretend it's rustic. She laughed. You've gotten sentimental. No, he murmured. I've just finally realized what I almost lost. Clara turned, rested her hands on his chest. I did too. Willa sneezed flour into the air. Okay, Clara said, grinning. Everyone out of my kitchen. No way. Willa darted behind Daniel, using him as a shield. He caught Clara's eyes as the flour dust settled. We're never leaving, he said softly. Clara looked at her daughter, hers in every way that mattered, and then at the man who had once been a ghost. She smiled. Good, she said, because this life, it fits. The end. For real. Thank you for reading You'll Never Be Her, a story about grief, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't come easy, but lasts. If you felt something while reading, if you rooted for Clara or saw yourself in Daniel's silence, if you believe in second chances, slow burns, and love that's earned, subscribe or follow for more emotionally rich, slow burn romance stories just like this one. More stories are coming. Different names, new heartbreaks, but always love that lingers long after the last page.